我美国那个客户今天终于回复我了。
My client in the U.S. finally replied today. This order might really be a long wait. The trade tariffs between the U.S. and China have increased to 145% as of today. We didn't expect this when we signed the order. Back then, the client only had to pay a 30% deposit, and then production started. Now we've already produced over 1,000 stage boards with anti-slip patterns. I've just told the production department to stop this order.
谈了半年的2个新的客户。
We've been talking for half a year with 2 clients, and the molds are ready. A few regular clients who place orders every month just informed us in the past few days that they are pausing orders. This is the real situation for factories after the tariff increases. Fellow traders in foreign trade, how's your factory doing?
又一次刚才从海关拉回来了。
This batch of goods was pulled back from customs. The tariff war is taking its toll. Small and medium-sized businesses are the biggest victims of this silent war.
在美国客户期货的风险是越来越大了。
The risk of U.S. clients canceling orders is growing. Yesterday, a friend mentioned in the group that their client paused the order and refused to pay the final payment, saying they'll deal with it later.
我们已经决定放弃美区市场了。
We've already decided to give up on the U.S. market. I just had a chat with several foreign trade and cross-border business owners. All the foreign trade bosses are struggling. I've heard that many foreign trade bosses have had their goods abandoned halfway.
工厂都倒闭的差不多了。
Many factories are almost all shut down. You raise tariffs and these machines are really just scrap metal now. The S205A precision machine can't be sold. This double spindle machine costs over 30,000 yuan, but no one's buying it. This high-end model is worth over 200,000 yuan, half price, but still no buyers. By 2024, even the Dota turret machine and power turret will be gone. Factories are shutting down, and you're raising tariffs. How are regular folks supposed to survive? Right now, everyone's struggling just to put food on the table.
Speaking of China's major foreign trade provinces, people first think of the coastal areas. Due to convenient port logistics, Guangdong, Jiangsu, and Zhejiang together account for half of China's foreign trade exports. Tens of thousands of small and medium-sized factories are going bankrupt, and for the 81 million workers involved in exports, there's no work left.
一夜之间，绍兴变了。
In just one night, Shaoxing has changed. There's no more factories, and workers are everywhere looking for jobs. Shaoxing used to be called the backyard of Hangzhou, but now factories have closed there, and people are flocking to Shaoxing. But look, the companies everyone talks about, like Sanhua, are no longer hiring. Su'er can't take anyone anymore. Angel isn't hiring. I've heard that nearly 100 workers are staying in hotels near factory gates, all waiting for Angel to start hiring. Even places like Shenzhou, Dumplings, once hiring workers above 50 years old, now wants workers under 35. These factories can hire 10 workers, but 20 people show up. Is there any good jobs left in Shaoxing? Folks from Shaoxing, can you tell me if there are any companies hiring now? Where can we make a living?
我说几句真话吗？
Let me be honest, if we can't take these orders from the US, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and other countries will be thrilled. They'll take over the market. Cambodia has long wanted to take this piece of the pie from China. Even though the US only accounts for 1/20th of the global population, it holds 1/3 of global consumption. I have a friend whose family in Dongguan, Guangdong, used to make trampolines for Americans, ones they use in their backyards. Now my friend's business is completely bankrupt, totally out of business. There's no way to keep going. They used to focus on the US market because only Americans could afford trampolines. Could we afford them? They tried to sell them domestically, but they couldn't sell. What can they do now? Before, tariffs were 10% to 20%, and they could manage, but now it's a disaster. This is a devastating blow to small and medium-sized businesses. I don't know what many people are fighting for, but if many people lose their jobs, what then? I graduated from university, and my work has been very unstable. This is a very real problem.
中国的工业制造成本优势
The advantage of China's industrial manufacturing cost is ultimately the result of poor human rights. It comes from countless Chinese people working long hours under high intensity, sacrificing themselves. We see this girl with dark circles working in a factory. One commenter said she looks like a shell whose soul has been drained by the assembly line. So where does this lead in terms of being far ahead? Only a small group of people are ahead. Look at the world. Only China is stubbornly resisting the U.S. tariff war. Almost every other country is preparing to talk with the U.S. because it's clear that the U.S. is the biggest buyer, the largest client. Other countries, as suppliers, need to please the buyer to secure their orders and maintain their income. Why does China choose to stand firm? Is it because China is really strong? In my view, it boils down to one thing. The Chinese government doesn't see its people as human. In the eyes of the current Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese people are less than cattle and horses, just weeds. What's the characteristic of weeds? Weeds keep growing back after being cut. As long as you don't pull them out by the roots, they'll grow again and again. They never stop. Meanwhile, the privileged class, who enjoy special supplies, will remain unaffected no matter how the tariff war goes. They don't need to worry about mortgage payments, children's schooling, losing jobs, income reduction, unemployment, or rising prices. Who is most affected? The result of standing firm is that many foreign trade factories will have to shut down, possibly facing bankruptcy. This means the upstream and downstream industries related to them will be affected as well. The U.S.-China tariff war continues to escalate. On April 9th, President Trump announced the suspension of high tariffs on 75 countries worldwide, but continued to increase tariffs on China to 145%. On April 11th, China's State Council responded, adjusting the tariff on U.S. imports from 84% to 125%. The statement noted, at the current tariff level, U.S. goods to China have no market acceptance. If the U.S. continues to increase tariffs on Chinese exports to the U.S., China will ignore them. On April 11th, CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping responded publicly for the first time to the tariff war, saying there are no winners in a tariff war, and that China is not afraid of any oppression. The CCP's retaliatory tariffs have been raised to 125%. This marks further escalation in the U.S.-China trade war. UBS analysts point out that this effectively means a complete breakdown in trade between the two countries. Both sides are not only facing economic confrontation, but also a loss of political trust.
朋友们，中美贸易战这个事儿，我觉得现在不是贸易战的事儿了。
Friends, I think the US-China trade war is no longer just about trade. The situation has gotten much bigger. I found that the US Consulate General in Shenyang is auctioning off second-hand furniture. Does that mean they're shutting down? Also, it seems like the US is gradually trying to get Chinese companies listed in the US to withdraw from NASDAQ. Some car companies that rang the bell in the US might really need to be careful.
Regarding the auction of second-hand furniture by the U.S. consulate in Shenyang, this is not just a rumor. On April 9th, the Shenyang consulate issued a notice. The U.S. Consulate General in Zhejiang will hold an auction of second-hand furniture and appliances on May 20th, 2025. There were instructions on how to attend and the location of the warehouse. This has sparked much discussion, with some people speculating that the consulate is expected to shut down. Amidst tense U.S.-China relations, it won't be the first time. In 2020, the U.S. closed its consulate in Chengdu, and China closed its consulate in Houston, causing bilateral diplomatic relations to dip to a low point. The general consensus is that these tariffs may lead to a full decoupling in U.S.-China trade. However, there's almost no response to this idea on the Chinese internet. The CCP authorities, apart from blaming the U.S., are very reluctant to use the term decoupling. Recently, Su Ziyun, director of the Institute of Defense Strategy and Resources at Taiwan's National Defense Security Research Institute, stated that if tariffs continue to escalate, it will be clear that the leverage is in the hands of the U.S. After all, the U.S. has market control and influence. Negotiating with 75 countries will likely allow the U.S. to replace China's supply chain. While China will try to find other markets and may create trade agreements outside the U.S., this will be disadvantageous for China due to its heavy reliance on exports. Su Ziyun also mentioned that the U.S. will gain the upper hand and maintain its technological lead, with the remaining factor being Trump's strategic decisions. He believes that the U.S. and China will enter an economic Cold War. In this tariff war, China has taken a hardline stance, but the situation is more complex. China cannot show weakness to the United States, but retaliating could lead to further escalation, causing more hardship for Chinese businesses and citizens. Economist Li Hengqing at the U.S. Institute for Information and Strategic Studies stated, "Since 2012, Xi Jinping has been pushing wolf warrior diplomacy, and this rhetoric cannot be toned down. His belief is that the East is rising while the West is declining, and the CCP wants to replace the U.S. as the world leader." Li believes this fantasy has become the CCP's ideology, and Xi Jinping does not care about China's economy or the people's lives. What matters to him is political image and grand narratives, retaliating against the U.S. tooth for tooth. In 2024, the total trade value between the US and China was around $585 billion US, with the US importing about $440 billion US from China, far exceeding China's exports from the US, which stand at about $145 billion US. Li Hongqing pointed out that among China's three main economic drivers, the only one still functioning normally is foreign trade, with a trade surplus of $300 billion US. A decoupling of US-China trade would further harm China's economy. A social media user recently analyzed that the tariff war marks the beginning of a comprehensive confrontation between the US and China, even predicting that trade might approach zero in the next 5 years. Recently, some goods shipped from China to the US have been canceled by buyers due to the inability to bear the high tariffs. Many goods that have already been produced are now stuck in warehouses, tying up significant amounts of capital. These pressures will eventually lead to the bankruptcy of some businesses, triggering unemployment issues. In the future, life will be very difficult for ordinary Chinese. It's reported that ports in major export hubs like Guangdong and Zhejiang are facing significant shipping delays. Containers are piling up at ports in Guangdong and Shanghai. Public pessimism is spreading, and there are even online discussions joking about how to eat tree bark in anticipation of coming famine. Recently, Mr. Fu, the owner of a mold steel export company in Shanghai, spoke to the media about his anxiety regarding an order worth 4 billion yuan that was supposed to start delivery by the end of April. Mr. Fu had been in the U.S. mold steel export business for over 20 years. Before the U.S. imposed tariffs on China in 2018, he had 8 orders, but now only 1 remains. His annual sales to the U.S. have dropped from 20 million to just over 7 million. The unprecedented high tariffs have made him worry about losing his last U.S. client. He stated that while he has not yet received notice of an order cancellation, it remains uncertain whether the client will be able to afford the high tariffs. He has already invested about 3 million yuan into this order. Most of the tariffs on goods shipped to the U.S. are paid by the client, but based on Mr. Fu's calculations, if tariffs exceed 70%, there would be no business left to conduct. He said, "This could be our last supper in the U.S. market." The U.S.-China tariff war has intensified, and the skyrocketing tariff rates have left many Chinese foreign trade businesses deeply worried. On Chinese social media platforms, business owners from various industries have been venting their frustrations. Factory notices circulating online show that some manufacturers who haven't received any orders have announced that they're halting production and putting workers on unpaid leave. According to Reuters, some manufacturers have yet to receive any orders from the U.S. They make Christmas trees and holiday decorations. The U.S. is a major market for Chinese Christmas decorations, accounting for 87% of the imports, and orders from Chinese factories are typically confirmed by mid-April. The soaring tariffs have also hit cross-border e-commerce hard. Wang Xin, president of the Shenzhen Cross-Border E-Commerce Association, which represents over 3,000 Amazon sellers, told Reuters that the tariffs have been an unprecedented blow to cross-border e-commerce sellers. Some sellers are hoping to raise prices in the U.S., while others are looking for new markets. As the tariff storm hits, small and medium-sized foreign trade businesses without strong backing are being forced to lay low, while other businesses are seeking new opportunities overseas. Almost every business owner interviewed by Chinese media mentioned that expanding overseas may be the only path left for their company. One business owner, Zhejiang, is planning to build a factory in Cambodia. On April 11th, he told the media, "The mood among businesses around me is one of wait and see. We have already set up a factory in Cambodia, initially renting a factory space and later buying land. We've now leveled the land, and we're preparing to build our own factory." Zhu believes that companies will still follow long-term plans and steadily go overseas to set up factories, primarily aiming to sell products in Southeast Asia and Europe. However, considering the current uncertainty, the scale of the factories may not be large. General Manager of Hangzhou Jiayi Garment Company, Ding Yongguo, stated, "The pressure from tariffs is indeed being passed down to the production side." He said that around 20% of orders indirectly exported to the U.S. might be directly shifted to Southeast Asian countries due to the tariff war. The two largest economies, the U.S. and China, have launched the largest tariff and financial wars. In addition to the strong impact on macroeconomics, this will ultimately affect U.S. debt, U.S. stocks, exchange rates, and assets like gold. There's speculation that Beijing may allow the yuan to depreciate further to cushion the impact of the tariffs. However, analysts also warn that a significant devaluation of the yuan could trigger a chain reaction, including capital outflows. which is a situation policymakers are keen to avoid. Therefore, the yuan is unlikely to undergo massive depreciation. After the yuan devaluation in 2015, capital outflows accelerated, with nearly $700 billion leaving China that year. With China's economy already in decline for several years, a large-scale capital outflow could make the situation even more complicated for the CCP. Additionally, it's likely that the CCP will sell U.S. Treasury bonds in large quantities to disrupt the U.S. bond market and increase U.S. borrowing costs. Reports suggest that the CCP sold $50 billion in Treasury bonds in mid-April, and the remaining $710 billion will be gradually cleared. Since the summer of 2017, the CCP has sold about a quarter of its U.S. Treasury holdings. According to data from the U.S. Treasury Department, as of January this year, China holds $761 billion in U.S. debt, second only to Japan. However, the effects of a currency war are highly complex. If China sells large amounts of U.S. Treasury bonds, not only will the U.S. be affected, but China will also suffer significant losses. As of March this year, China's foreign exchange reserves stand at $3.2 trillion, most of which are denominated in USD. If the US dollar and US Treasury bonds devalue significantly, China's foreign exchange assets will also depreciate.